So my name is Saahil Jain. I'm an engineer at You.com, and I usually go for a mocha frappuccino at Starbucks as well.
You mentioned some of the differentiators. Like one big one is citations. In fact, that's like one. My wife's a lawyer, and one of the biggest, I guess, like critiques of some of these language models is that they sometimes provide wrong answers or no references to where they got these answers from. And for certain industries, that's critical. You need to be able to cite a source, reference a source, dig deeper into that. And I use You.com because of that, the fact that it provides references. So what are some other things that you think make You.com different from your traditional search engine besides the obvious like technology behind it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's definitely there's a couple of factors. And if we think about You.com in general, and then I'll maybe go into both of them, and I'll start with YouChat. So YouChat is our conversational interface, and this is really where we're seeing a lot of excitement. We also see excitement in You.com in general, so both of them. But when it comes to YouChat, I think you're right. So one of them is the idea of being able to cite content. So when we show you a generation or we show you, a chat response, we try to cite the content. And we also are now including, web results as well as what we call our You.com apps, which have specific information from highly curated sources. So this is all part of the idea of being able to be more trustworthy. And we still have a long way to go. So we do have a disclaimer right now, which is we're still working and making sure that the accuracy is always improving. So users should be aware and know how to best use the tool. But in general, I think being able to have a really trustworthy chatbot is something that we're hoping will be a differentiator. And we have a lot of research and a lot of work to do to keep improving on all these fronts. But that's maybe one reason. And the second one is, and I think I hinted at this on the first one, but accessing a chatbot in the context of a search engine. It's a little bit different than accessing a chatbot in another environment. So the advantage here is that you can then quickly toggle and switch modes. Because a lot of times you're chatting and then you want to be able to dive deep. So we're trying to be able to enable both of those modes of exploration. So having a chatbot in the context of a search engine is something that we think is unique and can provide value. And I think the last one is accessibility and user interface. So we're trying to focus a lot on having a really nice user interface, figuring out the best way to not overload users with information, provide them tools to dig in deeply. So those are kind of maybe three axes of differentiation. And the last one would be this concept of an open platform. So the idea is that we have other people who can build apps which will eventually, which do live in You.com. And we've had a couple partners. So one example is a company called Luria. So they're a shopping company. They have like reviews and sites, whatever, and that type of stuff. And they have an app on You.com. And the idea is that we'll have all these, external folks essentially, building apps on You.com, and we'll be able to surface their content, hopefully allow them to monetize as well, and kind of grow the pie and really allow them to plug in whatever they build into a rich conversational interface. So I think that's maybe a little bit more about the future, is kind of building out an open platform where it's not just us, but it's really an open community that's building, a new product together.
But when it comes to search or You.com, what are some things that have they haven't been able to leave you alone? Like you think about them when you're going to sleep and when you wake up.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot, but I think maybe one of them would be around thinking a lot about how to combine a lot of the advances we're seeing in NLP with a lot of the traditional, foundational knowledge and information retrieval. So thinking a little bit like, what is the place of a lot of these techniques that have kind of stood the test of time when it comes to, searching. There's, just to give a simple example, like TF-IDF, BM25, these types of techniques that have, worked kind of well historically, as well as semantic search, which is kind of, based on, embedding documents and then doing nearest neighbor search, like approximate nearest neighbor search. So there's this whole entire world of, information retrieval, traditional information retrieval, neural information retrieval, neural re-ranking, using document signals, user preferences, all this type of stuff in this world related to, large language models, and especially of the generative variety. So it's like, how do we use both of these things together? How do we kind of, use a lot of the fluency of generative AI and a lot of these large language models, which can generate really fluid text, but how do we also make sure they're grounded using, information we know to be true about the world? Because in some ways, it doesn't make sense to, have a large language model have to encode all of this knowledge about the world. There's so much knowledge about the world. A lot of it's changing, especially when it comes to live information. So in some ways, it's clear that, you will also need knowledge bases, and you need some way to combine the two in the most optimal pattern. So I think that's something that I think is probably really interesting, and there's a lot that we're doing to think there. What is the role
So
of
good.
both, and how do they work together?
And there's been some really interesting papers actually in this space. I've been reading a few where retrieval augmented models, where they, in
Yeah.
addition to having some output from the model, also have some corpora of information that they can also access. And to me, that was like, I thought that's what people have been doing for a long time, but apparently combining them is a bit different than using two systems side by side. But very exciting times, lots of things going on.